Imagine you just bought a washing machine. Same model, same store, same brand. But this year, it costs $92 more. Not because it's better, not because it's newer, but because of something you didn't see, a hidden tax on a factory thousands of miles away. That's a tariff. It wasn't meant for you, but somehow you paid for it anyway. In 2018, the US launched one of the biggest trade wars in modern history. Tariffs were slapped on steel, aluminum, and hundreds of Chinese imports. Consumers lost over $114 billion in just 1 year. Farmers went bankrupt, prices went up. Economists warned of disaster, but the message was simple: we're protecting American jobs. What is a tariff, really? At its core, a tariff is just a tax on imported goods. There are two main types. A specific tariff is a flat fee, say $5 per ton of steel. An ad valorem tariff is a percentage, like 20% added to the price of a car. Either way, the result is the same: imported goods become more expensive. And that's the point. Governments impose tariffs for two main reasons. 1. To protect domestic industries by making foreign products less competitive. 2. To collect revenue, though in modern economies, tariffs make up a tiny fraction of government income. Now let's see what happens when a tariff is introduced. Foreign goods cost more. Consumers buy less. Domestic producers celebrate. They face less competition. But that celebration comes at a price. Consumers now pay higher prices. Some goods disappear from the market, and the country as a whole becomes a little less efficient. Economist Paul Krugman explains this using the concept of deadweight loss, a fancy way of saying the economy starts to waste resources. We produce things we're not good at. We consume less of what we need. We shrink the total value we could have created. But here's the trick. The damage is invisible. It's spread across millions of people in tiny ways. A few dollars here, a little less choice there. Meanwhile, the benefits are loud and clear. Factories stay open. Jobs are saved. Politicians take the credit. As Henry Hazlitt wrote in Economics in One Lesson, the most frequent fallacy in economic reasoning is to look only at the immediate consequences of an act or proposal and to neglect the long-term effects. And especially, to look only at the small group helped and ignore the larger group harmed. So yes, tariffs can help certain industries, but someone always pays the price. Usually, everyone else. Tariffs aren't new. They've existed for as long as countries have had borders. Long before income taxes or sales taxes, tariffs were how governments survived. In the early United States, tariffs funded nearly 90% of federal revenue. After independence, American industries were fragile, no match for the advanced factories of Britain. So the US government imposed high tariffs on British goods, not to raise money, but to give domestic manufacturers a fighting chance. This logic became known as the infant industry argument. Protect your baby industries until they grow strong enough to compete. It was used by Germany, the US, and later Japan and South Korea. And in some cases, it worked. But as we'll see later, protecting infants often turns them into dependents. Now let's head to 19th century Britain. The Corn Laws were tariffs and trade restrictions on imported grain enforced in Britain between 1815 and 1846, designed to keep grain prices high to benefit domestic producers. But the result was disastrous. Food prices soared, the poor suffered, and public anger exploded. After years of protest, the Corn Laws were repealed in 1846, kicking off Britain's turn toward free trade. It was one of the earliest and clearest signals. Tariffs may serve the few, but they can anger the many. Fast forward to 1930. US lawmakers want to protect American jobs. Sound familiar? So they passed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, raising tariffs on over 20,000 imported goods. The world responds with outrage. Europe retaliates. Trade grinds to a halt. Global trade plunges by 2/3 over the next 4 years. And what started as a plan to help American workers ends up deepening the Great Depression. Even today, economists look back at Smoot-Hawley as a textbook example of how not to use tariffs. After World War II, leaders feared a repeat of the 1930s, so they created GATT, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. Its mission: to reduce tariffs and encourage global cooperation. For decades, GATT, and later, the the World Trade Organization, WTO, helped bring tariffs down across the world. The average global tariff rate fell from over 40% in the 1940s to less than 5% today in many industrialized countries. Trade boomed, new global supply chains emerged, and for a while it looked like tariffs were going extinct. But they weren't gone. They were waiting for a crisis, waiting for a political moment, waiting for someone to promise protection again. Because history doesn't end, it just waits to be repeated. In 2018, tariffs returned, not as a relic of history, but as a bold political weapon. The target? China. The reason? Trade imbalance. Jobs. Fairness. Power. President Donald Trump announced a sweeping series of tariffs on solar panels, washing machines, steel, aluminum, and eventually hundreds of billions of dollars in Chinese goods. Trade wars are good and easy to win. Donald Trump. By 2019, the US had imposed tariffs on 66% of all Chinese exports. China retaliated immediately. A trade war had begun, and like all wars, it came with collateral damage. Economists ran the numbers. According to studies from the Peterson Institute and Krugman's models, US consumers lost $114.1 billion in a single year. Domestic producers gained about $31.8 billion, mostly in steel and related sectors. The government collected $65.9 billion in tariff revenue. But the total net loss to the US economy? $16.4 billion, every year. Nowhere was this more painful than on American farms. China, once the top buyer of US soybeans, slashed its purchases. Exports dropped by 63%. Farm bankruptcies soared by 24%. Many farmers were forced to plow crops back into the ground. The US government responded with a $28 billion bailout paid through the USDA's Market Facilitation Program. In the end, taxpayers paid twice, once at the store, once through the bailout. So, who won? Mostly, a small group of domestic producers with powerful lobbying arms. As Paul Krugman explains, protectionism often favors well-organized interest groups at the expense of the general public. And as Henry Hazlitt warned, the tariffs protect the visible job but destroy the invisible one. A tailor sees their shop saved, but no one sees the factory that never opened, the innovation that never happened, the cheaper product that was never bought. But economically irrational doesn't mean politically weak. Tariffs are easy to understand. They look strong, they sound patriotic, and they target foreign villains. Politicians love tariffs because they create heroes and enemies in a single sentence. They're stealing our jobs, we're fighting back. So the next time someone asks you why this washing machine is $92 more expensive than the other, you can explain.